Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle. I am your only host today that you can find on this very channel. There are usually two of us, but one of us is not here, as you can see. My partner, Noor, is attending her BFF's wedding as we speak, and on the other side of the country, so she couldn't even hop on the interwebs and be with us. So I am doing this solo tonight, so it will not be as good. I'm sorry. But that's what you get. So let's go over the standard stuff. If you're watching this on YouTube, welcome. We're very happy to have you. If you have not yet subscribed to us, let me encourage you to do so. There are many great benefits to subscribing to us. God will like you better if you subscribe to us. And you could win amusing prizes. You also help us get over the top and be able to have more control over our channel, and we would appreciate that. And along with subscribing, we would really appreciate it if you liked this video. Even if you don't like it, like the video, because it helps us get further up in YouTube's weird algorithm, and then more people see us and more people watch us, and the world becomes better in one way or another. If nothing else, we provide comic relief for the universe. So, there is that. Subscribe, like, hit the little bell, and you will be notified when we put stuff up, which happens at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, rarely 3 times a week. And we don't have any announcements for you because, well, actually we do. Noor and I are going to be doing a retreat in Sweden, probably at the beginning of October, maybe at the end of September. It'll be a week long. We're working to keep the price as low as possible. It will be a live-in retreat. We will be feeding everybody, though everybody is going to be cooking, helping us cook. And most thrilling part of the entire dinner thing is that one night I will make a traditional Native American or Southwestern meal for everybody. And let me tell you, it's great fun to feed Swedes chili. So there's that, and if you're interested in that, you can drop us an email. Our address is down in the comments, or you can join the Nine-Sided Circle Forum, and you will receive then all of the notifications. And you can also join our mailing list, and you get all of the notifications that way. And that's basically it. That's all of our announcements. Easy peasy, sweet, get it out of the way. So tonight, we're talking about will. Will is an interesting concept. And in the philosophical communities, there has been a debate, is there free will? Many of you have probably heard about this. And my contention is that is there free will is an incredibly stupid question, bordering on meaningless. That's like, free will is not something that there can be an is of. But you can ask, do I have free will? Or can I do free will? And that becomes more interesting. Because that's the, as far as I'm concerned, the only philosophical question worth asking for will. Can I do free will? Can I exhibit free will in my life? Or can I exhibit will in my life? So, what is will? Anybody care to take a stab at it? Yes, Jayesh.
In Sanskrit, they call it Sankalpa Shakti.
Yes.
Ability to do something.
Say that one more time.
Ability to do something.
Yes. There's another Sanskrit word that also relates to this. What is it? Vaja, if I'm saying it correctly. Which is very closely related. Let me see if I can type it out here. Yeah. There we go. Do you recognize that? Nope. I looked this up earlier because I wanted to see how many words I could find related to this concept. And this is a good one because it relates to the European concept as well. In Europe, in European languages, in Old English, you have willen, which means to wish or desire, to be willing. And that's from the old Proto-Germanic and the Old Norse vilja, and it goes all the way back to the old Proto-Indo-European root well or vil, depending on how you pronounce it. And it all has the idea of choice, preferences, to be chosen, to choose. And it also has the concept of according to one's wish. I think what comes most accurate to the kind of will we're talking to is what Jayesh mentioned, the first word. Do you have the ability to type that out, Jayesh? That is a good word. And while we're looking at it, I happen to have my handy dandy we will worry about that later. So, the interesting thing about this is all of the things that we've been talking about for the last 3 years. We've been doing this for 3 years now, just about every week, doing a talk on some aspect of the work. Everything that we've talked about is glued together by will. Now, Mr. Gurdjieff says human beings don't really have will. They have, at best, mechanical will, but they don't have objective will. And by and large, this is true, unless you develop your will. I would submit that you can use a metaphor of will is like a muscle. It is weak if you don't use it, and it becomes strong if you do. And if you want to do things like create a magnetic center for yourself, you absolutely must develop your will, because your will is what forces those little fragmentary eyes to get in line, to line up and begin merging with each other into one immutable eye. How so, you may ask? And let me tell you. Let's say I have a mechanical response to something. And I go, wow, I have a mechanical response to this. Maybe I should fix that. So, I observe myself and I wait until that response begins to manifest itself. When it does, I use my breath to stay centered and to stay awake. And I set my will to the intention that I will not let this happen. Well, instead of saying it that way, is I will do something different instead. I will do what I choose, not what I'm programmed to do. Start small. Because the big stuff is hard to move. There's a lot of inertia involved in this. And we're going to go over tonight some of the ways that you can develop will, that you can exercise your will as if it were a muscle and make it stronger. I was listening to a Buddhist lecture on this, and they contend that you should be able to fix your will on something unbendingly for an hour. I am very impressed if somebody can do that. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt until I can get them in an fMRI and see what their brains are actually doing. Does this make sense so far? Since there's so few of us tonight, we can have as much dialogue about this as you want. By the way, happy Memorial Day, everybody. That's not the way to say it. Memorial Day is not a happy day. You know, it's like happy remembrance of all of the people who got killed in the wars day. So, a little solemnity for that. Okay, back to what we're doing. Let's test how good your will is. I want each of you, and all of you who are listening to this on replay, unless you really want to do this, imagine for a second a candle flame in your mind's eye, just a candle flame. You can put a candle under it if you want, or not, depending on what you like. You can have a black background or white background, I don't care. Just imagine that candle flame and see how long you can hold it before you are distracted by a thought. Take your time, you got all the time in the world, and notice the first time you're distracted. When you notice that you're distracted, go ahead and put your hand up. And the distraction can be anything, like, what does being distracted mean? That's a distraction. Yeah. So, that's how long your will is. Your will is that strong to be able to hold that candle image without being distracted. And while this may seem simple, I find it to be a pretty good gauge of where a person's will actually is. Now, there are good ways to train the will and stupid ways to train the will. You must avoid the stupid ways. God, what was that guy's name? Nancy and Levita, you might remember, he was one of Nixon's plumbers, ended up in jail for a long time, got out, wrote some books, did a lot of...
Haldeman?
No, not Haldeman, the guy with the tough guy image.
G. Gordon Liddy.
G. Gordon Liddy, yeah. He's famous for once holding his hand over a candle to show people how much will he had. First of all, that doesn't show will, that shows stupid.
And did anybody do a tox screen on him?
That would have been very, very interesting, but no, I don't believe so.
Yeah, because if you're under the influence of certain drugs, you don't feel any pain. But, you know.
Yeah, well, even if he did, I'm sure that he could force himself to stay there with the pain. But that doesn't mean you have will, that means you're stupid.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when the Buddhists say that, you know, holding your will for an hour, are they talking about in flow state or without flow state?
I don't know the answer to that, but they're talking about in a state of meditation.
Okay.
Which is what you just did with the candle. basically.
Okay. Because I'm sitting here thinking, because if you're in flow state, you can kind of hold your thought on some things for very long periods of
Yeah,
time.
for as long as you're in the flow. Now,
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that will is a function of the prefrontal cortex up here. Flow turns the prefrontal cortex off to a great extent. So we have to think of will like priming a pump. Will hold you in a position of something until you make that initial leap across the barrier into flow. So say, I'm always using the fencing analogies, sorry. Say I'm fencing somebody and I use my will to keep my mind silent, to keep it completely shut up and just be there with the fencing. If I can do that for a minute or two, I'm going to more than likely enter into a flow state in the fencing. If I can't, then I won't. But once I enter into the flow state, I no longer need to have my will hold me there. I'm just coasting. So will gets you to throw yourself off the cliff, and flow gets you to have fun on the way down to the ground. Something like that.
Okay. So but even with will, would you still need to be would you still need to possess a sense of mastery of the thing that you're doing?
Actually, the best point where you hit flow is just above your level of mastery, when you have to push yourself a little bit. And I've seen this with people who are, I mean, yesterday I was training with somebody who was definitely a master in his craft, master Filipino martial artist. Actually, yeah, two master martial artists, but this guy in particular, I wouldn't tell him, but he's definitely better than me. But I'm teaching him, and so I have to be in flow state in order to teach him, because he's half my age and twice as strong and really fast. And what happens, though, is that we both get into a flow state when we start free sparring. And that's pretty impressive.
What do you do with your will when you're learning something that you're really bad at that point?
You use your will to keep yourself doing it. If you are bad at tying a particular knot, and you say, I set my intention to tie this knot and to do it correctly, and you do it, and the knot isn't right, so you take it apart and you do it again, and you take it apart and you do it again, and you take it apart and you try it a little bit different the next time, and you keep taking it apart and you keep doing it until such time as you have tied the knot. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't know if there's a certain number of repetitions where it's time to take a break, but it makes sense in general.
Yeah, you can take a break as long as you realize that you're going to come back from that break and you are going to continue to do what you're doing until you have succeeded. Does that make sense?
It does. I might go to a more micro level, like, not just I'm going to keep doing this until I succeed, but I am going to pay attention to what I'm doing or what's going wrong or something.
Yeah, you can chunk things down. So let's say I want to tie a lanyard knot. And in order to tie a lanyard knot, the first thing I have to do is have some cord. So I take this chord and I go, okay, I got to tie a lanyard knot. So I have this and I go, this is going to come over here like this. Then this part is going to go around, and then it's going to go over and then under and over. And I look at it and I go, that's not it. It came apart. So I go, what did I do wrong? Should I have it this way? Like this. I throw this in here again and I go over. That looks right. Under, over, and then out. And I have not quite got it, but it's closer. That's closer. That's not exactly what I need. And I look at this and I go, how do I change that? And I keep doing that until I get the first part of the lanyard knot, which is called a carrick bend. Once I do that, I'll practice that a couple of times. Pull this through. Bet you didn't realize that this was going to be a knot tying example. And you keep working until you get it. Once I get the carrick bend, I practice it until I can do that every time. Once I can do that every time, then I go on to the next part, which is bending the two lines around and dropping them through the center to create what's called a lanyard knot, which is this beautiful little woven looking ball of a knot. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that means that, does that mean that will is part of the function of flow as well? Like you need the focus. Mastery is not necessary, although it's helpful, but you definitely need focus as far as what you want to do to enter flow state and to continue to do what it is you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to tie that knot, you have to have enough focus to know that it's not working and what's not working and how to fix it.
Will is what keeps you trying until you get it. And there are some knots. Now, David can tell you, learning to tie a Turk's head can be problematic. It's a moderately complex knot. And David, how many times did you try before you got it right?
Weeks of hours.
Yeah, same here. When I first started learning to tie a Turk's head, I probably tied it 50 times before I got it, and then I had to tie it 50 more times before I could do it regularly. So, will is what kept me tying it. Will is the weapon used against the monkey mind that goes, I could be watching TV. Like, wait a minute, aren't you hungry now? Wouldn't you like to put this down and go get something really delicious to eat? And then you go do that and you think about, I should go back and tie this. But wait, there's this great show on TV. So, will is the ability to stay on task.
How do you cultivate that ability, that will, going back a step, it's that desire, how do you strengthen that will to continue practice when you don't like it?
First of all, you have to turn off that dislike emotion. You do that through your breath practice. So that, I don't like doing this. is often just your ego throwing a hissy fit. So you do your breath practice while you are doing whatever task you're doing, and you just keep doing it. It's like, how do you strengthen your biceps? Right? You do bicep curls, for instance, and you do a certain amount of them, and you do them on a regular schedule, and you increase the weight on a regular schedule. And there will be parts of that that you don't like, because when you're doing like a bicep ladder with kettlebells going up and down in weight, it really hurts at parts. There is some serious suffering going on. And yet, if you continue, if you get through that, oh, I don't want to do this, then you get past it. Now, there are some exceptions to this. If it's hurting you, you need to stop doing it. You understand what I mean by that?
You mean like you're so, like when people are workaholics and they do that to the exclusion of family, their health, their mental health, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that. So when I practice knots, I usually give myself a time. Like, I'm going to practice this new knot for 2 hours. The reason I do that is I really enjoy tying knots. I really enjoy doing decorative and functional knot tying. And if I don't set a timer like that, 6 hours will pass and I'm still there working on cool stuff. And I may have had other things to do.
Yeah. Jayesh said that if we value something very high, then we get the ability to pursue it.
This is true. Think of what it takes to be a master artist. Think of the hours of work. I don't know anybody, and this includes Mozart for that matter, who can just sit down at a piano and compose wonderful symphonies. The kid had to learn to play the piano first. People forget that part.
Yeah. He was very young, but he still had to put thousands of hours of practice in
Yes, he did.
and study.
Say again, Nancy? Or not, I mean, Levita?
I said, yes, he started learning very young, so people considered him a prodigy, but he still had to put thousands of hours of practice and training in.
Yes.
Yeah, somebody said, and I don't remember who anymore, but hard work wins when talent doesn't work hard.
Yeah. I remember there used to be discussions about natural talent versus just having to work to do it. And somebody pointed out Magic Johnson as somebody who was born with all of this natural talent, so he was fated to be, one of the world's greatest basketball players. Now, he was one of the world's greatest basketball players, but what I noticed, and what my friend failed to notice, is that Magic Johnson was in the gym 6 days a week training. He did not rely upon his natural talent. The natural talent got him to the door. The training got him to the championship. So,
Yeah, a lot of people make that mistake. They think that because it looks effortless, it is effortless. But if it looks effortless, you're looking at tens of thousands of hours of training
yep.
and practice and failure.
I don't know if there's more to be said about the moment when you realize that there was something you needed to notice and now you're noticing it.
Say more about that.
Well, I think this would be a reasonable thing for you're figuring out a new knot, and you suddenly realize that, oh, the string goes over at that moment and not under. It's like you hadn't been seeing it until you see it.
Yeah. One one of the things that I noticed about knots is that while there are millions probably knots, they're all made from maybe 5 or 6 different knots. Like if I start with a simple overhand knot, right? Simple overhand knot. Everybody knows this. You use it when you tie your shoes. This is the basis of a good 24 knots I can think of. You know, I can come back and slip this through here like this and take this overhand knot and pull it tight just like that, and I've created what's called a Honda knot. This is the knot that you use on a lasso to make the loop that you put the rope through so that you can easily throw a loop with your lasso and have it catch on the cow and not hurt the cow and be easily released. And it's just a twist around an overhand knot. There's a couple of dozen like that, just on that one simple knot. And I could show you more, but this isn't a video about knotting. Maybe I'll do one of those. I actually have done one of those on my private YouTube channel. I have a private YouTube channel. Don't really do anything there, but I did do a whole series on how to actually tie a square knot. So, you have to exercise your will. And the reason that this talk is called The Will to Attention is that the place to start with exercising your will is holding your attention. Now, I've tricked you guys into doing this already. Every time you do the breath practice, you are willing yourself to attention. Did you know that? Yes, no, maybe?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, that's how it works best.
Can you make a comment on grit with will?
Grit and will are not exactly synonymous, but they're pretty damn close. Grit is, I mean, there's someone who wrote a whole book on grit, and I can't remember the name of it. And she recognized like 1 or 2 kinds, and I think there are actually 3 or 4 kinds of grit that you can have. But it's basically the same sort of thing. Grit is the ability to exercise your will, to keep on task, even when the task is hard. Sorry, I got to put that down. Put a string in my hands and I just sit there and tie knots while I'm thinking.
Stop talking. But that's what I'm noticing with people and myself, that get mustering up that grit to continue with the task that's difficult, that's onerous, that's the payback comes so slowly. Giving up is tempting.
Yes.
And I think that goes for a lot of people that I'm noticing trying to train with them or give them suggestions on what they're doing, but they want the algorithm that can get them there the fastest. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get stronger. You're not going to get more flexible. You're not going to get more whatever. You can't read it. That's the thing. You can't read this and actually have will. You actually have to do the will.
Yeah. And that's something that people tend to forget.
Mm.
So,
I'm thinking grit. When I think of grit, I think of my first thought was stubbornness, but that's not it. It's more like on task stubbornness, like I'm determined to get this thing done. I don't care what it takes, or my threshold for doing what it takes is higher than just my convenience or my comfort. But the trick also is like you have to kind of use your will to determine when is that balance off. Like sometimes it's like, yeah, you got to bleed a little to get to this level, and when is that price too high? That's what I'm thinking.
now that's going to depend on what is motivating you when the price is too high. If you want to walk 5 miles in a day and you get to 2 miles and there's a nice park and a beautiful bench, and you go, oh, I've had a really nice walk and I'm just going to sit here and rest, and then I'm going to call a lift and go home. That's different than I have to walk this 5 miles because my partner is sick and I need to get the drugs for it from the pharmacy, and I'm just going to do it. Depends on your motivation. And this gets into Gurdjieff's ideas of super effort. He used to get his students to do these crazy super efforts, work their asses off, work until they drop just about, work past the drop point, push themselves past it, specifically to help them develop will. I think it's not the best way to do it, but that, Gurdjieff had a hammer. And so that's what he used.
I don't think I would like that hammer, but I can see where if you push people past their perceived limits, they start to realize that what they think is the limit is more like what's comfortable, like the outer edge of what's comfortable.
Yeah. And you are not a stodgy Russian intellectual, so you may not need the same medicine that they needed.
It's true. True.
Yeah. You may, I would hazard a guess that you actually know what it's like to do an honest day's work. And the people that Gurdjieff started working with in Russia, by and large, didn't.
Mm.
This was the aristocracy. They had servants for that stuff.
Just for another angle, there have been times when I've had trouble with my calligraphy, like the ink is just not covering properly. I can't get a nice clean edge. And I have had at least a fair amount of determination in trying again and again. And eventually it hit me that no, I need to sharpen the pen point. I need a little more water in the ink. I need a different paper. I don't know, it's different levels of effort.
Yeah. And all of that counts as practice.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the reason you're having trouble is because you need to take a break. I discovered that doing web design. You can't get it to work. And then the next day when you're not tired, you do it again. Same thing you think you did the day before, and it works just fine.
Funny how that.
Yeah. Excuse me, I missed that.
Yeah, I said, funny how that happens.
Yeah, and that's related to that thing I was talking about of that moment of noticing, which can come from taking a break. But you have to put the work in before you take the break.
Yep.
This is true. when I think about the price being too high part, I usually think about using the workaholic excuse again. Like, okay, well, you've climbed the ladder of success. You are now a CEO, CFO, grand poobah, whatever. But now you realize when you look back, like, I did it. There's nobody to share it with because you burned all your bridges on the way up, or you've destroyed your health, or, it was fraudulent. So now you're going to prison, or like, that's what I think about when I think the price is too high. It's like,
Yeah.
I think there's also your will can work to balance those things out on the way up. Like, you have to pay attention to all the things at the same time and keep them going. And then you can go as high as you can, given all that balance.
Yep.
yeah, but you also have to pay attention to the price you're paying in terms of there are going to be some sleepless nights. There are going to be some times when you're going to miss PTA meetings and recitals with your children. There are going to be some times when you're going to miss family things, or you're going to be working really hard and not taking a paycheck or whatever. I mean, there's still a price that has to be paid in sweat and discomfort and inconvenience,
Yep. And it all starts with breathing consciously for 5 minutes a day.
I have a question.
Yes.
I read somewhere that breathing is the only thing that is controllable by us consciously for ordinary folks. I mean, because we know there are people who can do all kinds of things, but consciously and on an autonomic level.
Yes. And this is functionally true. I mean, with practice, you can control your blood pressure, your heart rate, various functions of the body. But breath is immediately accessible. Our breath is our superpower. No other animal, with the exception maybe of dolphins and whales, breathes like we do. We have conscious control of our breath. Maybe not as conscious as, say, a dolphin, who, if a dolphin is knocked out, it will not breathe automatically, I'm told, which makes sense. But with us, we can breathe in our sleep and never have to worry about it, and yet wake up and completely regulate how we breathe. And we can do it under every circumstance. We can do it sitting, walking, running, fighting, dancing, exercising. We can choose how to breathe. And we're like the only creature on the earth that gets to do it like that. The only terrestrial creature. And that's fairly amazing. And this includes things like running. Pretty much all land animals, when they are running at their fastest gait, can only take one breath per stride. And this is from cheetahs to tortoises. We can completely regulate our breath at our fastest gaits. This is why in the Yoga Sutras, pranayama sits where it does, which is pretty much at the center from the outer to the inner. Pranayama is the bridge between the outer world and the inner world, between body and consciousness, all of this kind of stuff. And we are capable of doing some pretty amazing things by breath regulation alone. You know, you look at somebody like Wim Hof. You know, he goes around and sits in ice water for hours and hours, stuff that would kill most people. And he's just regulating his breathing in a particular way when it comes right down to it. And he has a lot of will that he's built up to do that. Not that I recommend that you go out and sit in giant barrels full of ice water for any length of time. Probably not a good idea. Unless you want to. But if you do want to, get some training.
And there's the point, being clear about what you want and what
Yes.
you're doing. If you're not clear, it's not going to be sustained. Full stop.
That wasn't me.
That was me.
So, you start your training in will with your breath. When you can sit for 5 minutes, keeping your attention on your breath, being awake to your breath, breathe consciously, awareness on breath. When you can do that for 5 minutes, you're ready to expand. And you start thinking of other things that you need to do. And it doesn't have to be something that you want to do. It can be something that you need to do. For me, it's the dishes. I hate doing the dishes. Did I mention that I loathe doing dishes? And yet, I can use my will to sit or stand and do the dishes and do it from start to finish and not stop and not procrastinate and not do any of these things because it needs to be done. And it's my job to do them, especially now because I'm the only one here. So if I don't do dishes, you get piles of dishes. And when you live in a tiny house, piles of dishes are a bad thing. So, once you have gotten pretty good at breathing consciously, you use that same will, that will to your attention, to do the will to do. I want to do X. And then you practice until you can do X, or until you've accomplished X. That can be, I need to do my term paper. David doesn't need to do his term paper anymore, but once upon a time, not that long ago, he needed to do his term paper. And will is what gets that term paper done. Either that or terror, because you realize you've only got 20 minutes to get it finished. And I know this doesn't seem like much, does it? It doesn't seem like, oh my God, this is great revelations. And it's not great revelations. But nobody teaches this anymore.
And at the same time, we still got to stop making excuses. That's the thing. The distractions, we're just looking for excuses all the time. So just get on with it. Just do it. You know, the term paper thing, the only way I got through that was to make myself do it 1 week early all the time.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a procrastinator. I thought, I hate the feeling of the stress of the night before the due date. And I just thought, that's it. I'm doing everything a week early. This was a tip from a friend, and I bless her for that because it got me through my course. And you just think, yeah, okay, do something different. If you really want to get something, if you're clear about what you want, keep that in mind, get on with it. Stop making excuses.
What I also think is nice is that with will, it's you are the boss of you. You are bossing yourself. You are telling yourself this thing needs to be done. And, you know, there's no, like, it's funny because sometimes you watch people rebel against themselves Like, I know I need to do this thing, and it's my decision to do the thing, and then they don't do it. And it seems to me like will is the foundation of everything else.
Yes. And that's exactly the point of this talk. Will is the foundation to everything else. Without will, there is no glue that holds everything together. All of the practices that we've been talking about this last 3 years, it all boils down to this one tiny little thing. Do you have real will or not? If you have not developed your will, knowing about these practices will do you zero good, because you won't do them. You know, people say to me, you're revealing some pretty heavy shit, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, so what? And they're like, but what if people misuse it? And it's like, the people who would misuse it do not have the will to learn it.
And the people who really have the will to misuse it are already doing so.
Yeah, or they're misusing other things. They aren't misusing the kind of stuff that I'm teaching because it protects itself.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it really does. And people don't realize that. But there's plenty of crappy things out there that you can misuse.
Yeah. I remember talking to somebody I knew, and they were trying to develop their body. They wanted the V, chest, shoulder V thing with the abs. And they were overweight, which was okay. And they said, you know, I'm really struggling here because I am exercising and I've gone to the gym and I'm going every day and I'm, you know, doing all these exercises. And then when I take my shirt off, it still doesn't look the way I want it to look. Like, I'm getting stronger, but it doesn't look the way I want it to look. And I said, I'm not an expert, but I remember being told that abs are not made in the gym. They're made in the kitchen. And you have to, like, I don't know how to do it, so you have to look it up or get a trainer, but you have to change your diet so that your body will burn off the excess fat, because you have the muscles, but you can't see them. And they kind of said, thank you for your time and your input, blah, 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 but I'm still going to eat my cheeseburgers and my ribs, and I'm going to eat. And, you know, they wouldn't take that bit in hand.
Yep. And
They
therefore,
wouldn't
they never got to
exercise
see
the will.
their abs.
Nope. They protect them with a layer of fat.
Yep. And that is God's awful truth. Everybody has a six-pack. Every single human being out there has a six-pack, unless they're freaky and have an eight-pack or something. But the thing is that most of us have a little bit too much padding over that six-pack. So, if you would like will, you start with the breath. I repeat myself. I'm old. I get to do that, right? You start with the breath. You lay the foundation of your will with breath practice. You learn to meditate. You learn to do self-remembering, self-observation, self-witnessing. All of these things are exercises that require will. And you get a physical practice. One of the quicker ways to develop will is in a physical practice. I hate to say it for people who don't like to exercise, but it's true. I mean, even if it's just walking, that physical practice will double the amount of will you can develop. And then send me all your money. That's the last thing to get will. Sorry, I've been watching cultists all week and stuff slips out. So that's what it takes. This is not rocket science. This is very, very simple But simple doesn't mean easy. But I guarantee you, if you follow these few steps, starting with your breath, working on meditation, working on a physical practice, and learning the practices of the way, the practices of the work, your will get strong if you want it to. Then there are the negatives that you can do, which stop watching so much television. Put your damn phone down. Limit the things that make you go unconscious. I love video games. There's a couple that I really enjoy playing, and I have to be very, very self-disciplined and exercise my will to, I only play a couple of hours a week. And if I catch myself doing more than that, it's like, bad. No donut. There are things that are toxic to the will. And the things that are toxic to the will are things that make you go to sleep. And when I say sleep, I don't mean in bed at night, I mean in your mind right now. So you work on eliminating those, just like you eliminate crappy foods from your diet. Eliminate crappy habits. And I'm sorry, but now I love movies. But again, you have to use some discipline. Watch a movie a week. Watch one TV show a week, maybe two. But if you do more than that, you run the risk of weakening your will. Yes, Lavita.
So then we should be very mindful of unconsciously seeking dopamine hits.
Yes, that would be very wise. And let me put in a special thing about things like Facebook. Facebook is designed to capture your attention and hold it for as long as possible. That's what it does. Your job is to not let it do that. YouTube is somewhat the same. The algorithm works a little bit different. But you do these things, and you will actually end up developing will. And eventually that will be free will, in the sense of the ability to choose to do what you want to do. There's a cool Sanskrit word. It's Ishvara. And it's often translated as God, like, or Lord, like Yogeshvara. That's one of the terms you use for Shiva, the Lord of the dance. But if you take the word apart and you look at its root meanings, it means that which has the ability to choose. And there's a profound truth in this that people don't realize, that ability to choose is the divine spark within you. And that only happens when you have will. And that means that you have pretty much dealt with the crap in your consciousness that has created your conditioned self, including by and large your samskaras. Those pesky little things that hang out just below the level of consciousness and jump up and go, hey, let me distract you with this or that or the other thing. Does this make sense? You notice how I only get to the good stuff in the last 15 minutes of the talk? That's because I have no use for people with short attention spans. Yes, Jayesh.
in Yoga Sutra, Patanjali used this term Ishvara, and he meant only this meaning that Ishvara is not like God, but
Yes.
Ish is the best, and Vara means to choose.
Yes.
So one is able to choose the best for oneself, and that is Ishvara.
Yeah. It took me 10 years to realize that that's what it meant. But when I did, it opened up whole new vistas to me of the meaning of the Yoga Sutras.
And other thing regarding this will is we start using will in small things, but finally we end up doing that final teaching that like what it dislikes,
Yes.
because ultimately we face so many situations in life that we dislike, but then ultimately we have to like it
Exactly right.
too.
Well, folks, that's pretty much, I mean, Jayesh said it exactly perfectly. That's what we're talking about, is getting you to that point where you can realize this concept of choosing the best, or being the best chooser, or being the one that can choose. And that's a profound concept, the idea of there is that within you that can actually choose things, that is not subject to stimulus response conditioned patterns. And it's your job to get to that, should you care to take it on. So, any last thoughts or questions? No? Okay, then I'm going to switch over to Brady Bunch mode. There we are. And we can all say goodbye to each other. Thank you for coming. It was delightful to have you, and we'll hopefully see everybody and more people next week.